Welcome to Recross the Paths. My name is Cade, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Andy. Welcome, my friend. I'm so glad you're here.
The pleasure is all mine, for sure. I am very grateful to be here.
There's something nice about being able to connect with people through a vehicle like Cube that you wouldn't otherwise interact with. This is really special for me, as certainly your work with Lucky Paper has been an inspiration to me over the years of getting into Cube and learning the ropes. And so now it's fun to get to sit down in this context, literally across the country, to explore some more about this thing that brought us together.
It means a lot that the show is inspirational to you. That's like very touching to me. And I've been the kind of person that, like, my entire life, I have made weird friends over the internet. And going all the way back to like high school, I was very active on a forum for the guitar tablature for the Dave Matthews Band. Was like the first online community that I was like really invested in. And yeah, I mean, I was a child, so, didn't have a fully developed brain. And for that reason, it was certainly weird. But
Kids, talk to your parents before going online.
yeah, kids should do that now. When the internet came to my home when I was a child, I was the only one that could figure out how to make it work. So I was definitely, I was in charge. There was nobody monitoring my internet access, and before you know it, I had weird friends all over the world that were playing guitar together. I collaborated on music tracks with people that I never met that lived all over the world on a forum in 2004 or whatever, 2005. And that was like the beginning. And then I've made friends for life on Twitter. Like, one of the people that was like ostensibly in my like groomsmen party at my wedding was somebody I met on Twitter and then didn't meet in real life for like 3 years, but we in the interim like recorded a podcast together, and then eventually finally met. So I've always had like weird internet friends, and as regular listeners to at least my podcast will know that I'm very I don't know, a cynic, I would say, of a lot of technology, but
Right, right.
I do fundamentally have to, at the end of the day, be like, yeah, the internet's pretty great because it allows me to like connect with people that really share something very specific and deep and like narrow about whatever interest that I'm deep in at that time.
Yeah, certainly the connections that we make in these sorts of venues do last in some cases. I mean, I think of the many folks that I've met online that then I get to connect with at things like CubeCon or Cube for a Cause upcoming, or potentially Shoebox in the spring, like these sorts of things where the people that you meet in the internet do exist in real life in many cases and can impact your life in profound ways. Well, I know we could ramble on the philosophical side, and I love doing that from time to time, but I'm excited to have you here to explore some about really looking at Cube community and what some of what goes into that. As we jump in, Andy, I like to ask at the front end, why Cube? You're a creative person. You have lots of potential outlets that you've been in the past. So why this one?
Yeah, I guess you're really starting with the big existential questions here. I remember being in like high school, and I did a lot of visual art in high school, which was kind of the creative outlet du jour on offer in my public high school. And I remember thinking at some point when I was like looking for classes, and I was like, well, I can't also take this photo class and this sculpture class because they overlap in time slots, and like that's a bummer. And just realizing at that age that I was going to die before I was going to make all the stuff I wanted to make. Like,
Hmm.
I would love to just like leave society and just not have a job and just make art for the rest of my life. And I still wouldn't get to make all the things I want to make. And so, yeah, I definitely have days where I'm like, I kind of wish I had put all this time into something else, maybe, right? Like, I have put so much time into making Lucky Paper Radio for 5 years, and we just recently hired an editor for the first time. But
It's amazing. Yeah.
for 5 years, I edited the podcast every single week and recorded every single week. And as soon as we hired an editor, I started spending that energy on some other things that are, well, I guess they were behind the scenes. By the time this episode comes out, we'll be public on like designing some other things and doing some other sort of work for Lucky Paper projects that was not editing the podcast. And I think Parker at some point was like, Andy, you're like getting so much done. Look at all this, how productive you're being. And I'm like, yeah, buddy, this is what this exact time has been going towards editing the podcast for 5 years. Like, this is how much time it's just been invisible because it just comes out like a podcast that's like goes down smooth, easy to listen to. But when I spend all that time instead drawing or designing something or planning something, it all of a sudden seems like a huge undertaking. I'm not gonna lie, I at times wonder, like, if I had spent those hundreds of probably thousands of hours doing something else, what could I have accomplished by now? But I'm very grateful for what the show is and the community it's connected us to.
Yeah, and I hope I didn't imply that that was like a regret or anything, but at least considering.
That's how my brain heard it, Cade. Okay.
Oh no. Yeah, do you ever regret your life choices, Andy? You can
You
lay
ever
down on the
regret
couch if you need.
making 270 episodes of a podcast about a trading card game? You ever think about that? You ever think about how you're spending your one life on this planet? If you died tomorrow, would you regret that?
Yeah, there's something about that, right? Where you wonder, are the things that I'm doing worthwhile? And especially in stuff like this, where even though it is personal connection exercises, it's like, am I going to look back on this fondly in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time? Who knows?
Yeah.
But like you said, the big questions off the bat. So, talking about big questions, Andy, what even is the cube community? Like capital C, capital C. Like when we think about the community of people in the cube space, what does that even mean? How, can that even be defined?
Yeah, I think Anthony and I have talked about this before, and I think Anthony has said, like, look, you're not a community just because you all like the same thing, right? Cube is like a little more specific, right? Because most of us are making something. It is a creative outlet to some degree. Like I am interested in mechanical watches, and mechanical watch people call themselves like the watch community. And it's like, no, you are just the consumers of mechanical watches. Like nothing that like ever meant community to people 100 years ago is present here. You are just people that have like an overlapping interest, right?
They really didn't go with the Watchmen.
No, they say the watch community.
Lame.
Yeah, so I think at times what people describe as the cube community can feel like that's a overly ambitious term for what it actually is, which is just a bunch of strangers that have one overlapping interest and otherwise nothing in common. And I kind of felt that way for years too, until going to the very first KubeCon and going there for the first time and seeing all these people. I don't know how many people I met there for the first time that I knew either from Discord or from the subreddit or from at the time what was Magic Twitter. I met so many people for the first time there, and then people that also like I had never met and didn't even know from online. But now that I met them, I then followed them online and like sort of connected these dots. And I have to say that like making those in-person connections and like actually seeing and feeling the human behind the little username, I think does actually go a ways to like starting something that is an actual community. And I do think we have something like that in the cube world. There's like all these like kind of layers of it, right? Like if you're lucky enough to get to travel to a bunch of these events like I am and you get to meet all these people in person. Yeah, I'm kind of lucky to be like in the sort of inner circle, right? I think you're in here too, right? Like people that are like able to go to a lot of these events and meet a bunch of people were like know each other closer and more intimately than people that just talk online for the most part. And then as you sort of zoom out in these rings of connection, you get to people that maybe check in on the subreddit every once in a while, or like one of these outer rings. But to some degree, yeah, I think we're all kind of interconnected in this particular way. And since meeting people through playing a stupid card game, I have had plenty of real, human friendships again that sort of come out of it. The same way I met people through talking on Twitter, right? Through making dumb jokes on Twitter in 2009 or whenever. I met some good friends that became people that went to my wedding. The same way that talking about a silly card game was a way to meet actual friends that I do actually have in real life. So yeah, I don't think it's like one big circle that everyone is equally a part of. I think it's like, actually kind of more beautiful for it to be a bunch of overlapping circles and weird shapes. And, there are parts of the Cube community that I have no interest in being a part of and will never run in. And there are parts of the Cube community that I participate very actively in and believe in and want to be a part of. And there are also new parts that I want to make that don't exist yet. And so my sort of perceptions of what a community is have definitely shifted over the years as I have come to know this space better.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you use the word vision. I think that's a helpful way to think about that, especially if you're in a position to engage with that. Do you feel like, based on your where you are with the Lucky Paper organization, like, do you feel like you're in a place to be able to speak into that
The
differently than
Lucky
others? Maybe.
Paper organization.
Boy, what am I keep trying to avoid saying. I keep trying to avoid saying Lucky Paper Radio because I know it's more than that. It's just
Yeah,
Lucky
yeah,
Paper.
yeah.
I could
Um,
I could try that again. That sounded really
no, no,
dumb.
no. It's just so funny to me because I think it's actually like emblematic, right? Like Anthony and I talk about this a lot, where like when we started the podcast, we were just like some guys talking into microphones, right? And nobody listened, and we posted a couple places and had a few listeners, and then built it up slowly from there. And it's funny. I remember like certain moments where I felt like, oh, to some people, we have now become like the establishment, right?
Yeah.
Like it felt like when we started the podcast, we were kind of challenging this paradigm that like cube should always be about the most powerful cards. That's like the best kind of cubes, or the cubes that are full of powerful cards. And we kind of started with a lot of ideas, but one of the sort of core ideas, certainly one of Anthony's core ideas, was like challenging that. And it's funny that like recently-ish on Blue Sky, there was a bunch of discussion where some people were like, "I'm so tired of people not liking vintage cubes. Like that's a valid way to cube too." And it was like,
Yeah.
I felt a little bad, first of all, because I was like, I feel like if you follow this trajectory, at some point we're responsible for some amount of this sentiment. But I also was like, it's crazy to say that because if you talk to anybody outside of the little tiny cube community, that's still all cube is to most people. And so it's like, it's kind of nuts to have people be like, yeah, vintage cube is valid. It's like, yeah, for sure. That is what cube is to most people. It is like so valid. But at some point, yeah, you become the establishment a little bit. And so I guess to answer your question, it's like, yeah, I think we do have some influence at this point, and therefore some responsibility to like do something reasonable with it, right? And the way I look at that in normal day-to-day terms, making the show is like I will occasionally make a political statement on the show, right? I'm not going to shy away from that. There's some things I feel like need to be said that are not being said. It's kind of funny. People have often asked like how I decide what things to like say something about, because I don't about most things, but then every once in a while I do. And truly, it's like whether I sort of have an inkling that either a big chunk of our listenership doesn't know or maybe hasn't formed an opinion on something that I feel strongly about. But every once in a while, I think will pop up, and I feel like there's a sort of responsibility just to say something, right? Like we're in enough people's ears every week that I feel like I want some things to be like resonating through society and breaking confinement of the news cycle. And I want to be one little tiny reflector of certain messages in that way. And in other ways, yeah, it's like one of the reasons we hesitated on starting a Patreon for the longest time. Number one, we didn't want to like monetize our hobbies, and I still kind of feel strongly about that. And that's like to me a compromise. Like, kind of have to do it if you want to pay an editor, unfortunately. But that was a big hesitation. But another one is like I think once money is involved, and that a lot of that influence is different and quantifiable in a way that I think does introduce an additional level of responsibility. I am a very annoying person. Which is to say that like I can't just like buy a thing and be happy with it. That is I don't have that capability. So because of this, I like thoroughly research everything in my life. I try to like minimize my consumption. I just bought a sweater on eBay from Japan. Okay, so that's
This is the level we're working on. Yeah.
putting aside carbon footprint, which ordering a sweater from Japan. That's not great, I'll admit. But look, I just bought a sweater on eBay from Japan that I have literally, Cade, been looking for 12 years. I saw a picture of Jake Gyllenhaal wearing a sweater on the internet 12 years ago, and I said, that sweater's awesome. I got to get that sweater. And I spent enough time researching to figure out what kind of sweater it was. And it turns out it's a sweater made by some like designer, whatever company, because it was probably just given to him on like the set by some like, costume person.
Right. Right.
Uh, but it's made by this designer, it's like Italian company that makes different things every year. They never remake the same sweater. So they made the sweater like 2 years prior as part of their like fall collection for that year, and have never returned to it. And I have had saved eBay searches, saved Poshmark searches, saved Grailed searches for over a decade. And I finally found it 2 weeks ago in my size, and it's
That's
incredibly sweet.
amazing.
So that's the kind of guy that I
Wait,
am.
and that's annoying to you?
Well, here's why it's annoying, because I'm awful to buy gifts for. It's literally impossible, basically. Like you cannot buy a gift for me. And one of the reasons I really like struggle emotionally with gifts is that I don't want anybody ever to like participate in this consumptive system on my behalf, right? I'm very sensitive to that. The idea that like you bought this because you thought I wanted to have it, and now I don't. So now I'm gonna have to like give it away, or throw it away depending on what it is. And for those reasons, it now is like one of the many things that piles up on this like mountain of inefficiencies and waste of the system by which resources are allocated currently. And that gives me profound existential dread. So the idea of us taking money from anybody and then essentially having some of that responsibility, right? Like, what do you do with this money now, is something that weighed very heavily on me. I didn't think of starting a Patreon year one of the show, but probably a
Right.
year in, it was the thing that occurred to me. So for 4 years, it's like a thing I've been thinking about and just didn't want to do because of that additional sort of responsibility. Yeah, I think there's a lot of responsibility there. This is a really long answer to your question of like, do you think the show has any like role of centrality in the Q community? And the short answer is yes, and I think it comes with responsibility.
Spider-Man has something to say about that, I think. This
is
is
that a
the with great power comes great responsibility is
oh,
the
is that
quote
from
from.
Spider-Man originally?
Yeah.
I thought that was like a real life politician that said that. That was Spider-Man?
I mean, I imagine other people have said it in different ways. That's
I
just
thought
the
that'd be like
most popular
Winston
version of
Churchill
this.
or something. That's
uh,
that's cool if it's Spider-Man. That's I like
attributed
Spider-Man more than Winston Churchill, so I'm in.
attributed to Uncle Ben most frequently, I think. But
Okay.
we're gonna find out here in a few short weeks, I think.
Mhm.
What is emotionally resonant for you? If it's like you don't want people to give you gifts, or you don't want people to engage in a consumerist way of trying to show appreciation, what does do that for you?
Oh man, I actually wrote a like article years and years ago on gift giving because someone asked me a similar question when I was younger, and I was like, I will write about this. I could probably dig it up somewhere, but in short, the things that I like to receive as gifts are number one, consumable. That's great because I can consume it, and then it's gone. It's no longer a thing I have to like carry with me. So I'm more than happy to consume something that I didn't research thoroughly because it's got a shorter lifespan. So like that's great. I love things that are made by people, like handmade. I'm looking right now at my coasters that Joe Anderson made me that you may have
Yes,
heard him mention on the podcast when he was on.
arguably
Which
the nicest man in Cube.
no, I mean I think I don't think it's arguable. I think he immediately was like, no, it's actually Kate, and we were all like, yeah, no, yeah, that's actually
No, no,
100% true. Yeah,
no, no,
sorry,
no,
Joe,
no.
you're actually much meaner than Kate. Um, Yeah, so, like, I think handmade things are always great gifts, generally speaking. I mean, I guess it depends on what you're hand making. If you have an incredibly wasteful craft practice at home, maybe I would change my tune. But yeah, I think something handmade is really nice because you had a participation in the sort of bringing that thing to exist, and it's inherently one of a kind, and I think that's really lovely. And then I'm a big believer in very modest, like humble gifts of excellent quality. I think a lot of people would like not want to get somebody something small and trinkety or whatever as a gift, but I'd so much rather get something like so small but like well considered and like thoughtfully made than something more like lavish that just kind of looks nice in a box but is actually crap, you know?
Right, right. No, that all makes sense.
And more as I get older too, like, you know, I just have this. I don't need any things. I've got the stuff I need. I don't know. I'm very lucky to be in that position. And I feel like a lot of my friends are kind of in a similar spot where it's like we don't need stuff, and so it's more about like acts of service for people. Do something nice for them. That's a great gift.
And who of your friends would know what sweater you're looking for after 12 years anyway?
Yeah, none of them actually, because I've tried to tell some of them and they all just tune out and they're like, okay, cool, great, buddy.
Just immediately out.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly didn't mean to imply some like industrial organization element to Lucky Paper.
I
Just
mean,
kind
it's
of.
fair. Like we
Well,
we
no,
have our operating cost page, and I was shocked to find that like a decent amount of money has flowed through our hands even before starting the Patreon. So like, I think it's fair. I think it's a fair thing to say. It's funny for me to hear because it's just like you never think of yourself as an old person, and then you're like, oh, actually, I am old now. It's like I will never think of this as like an organization in that sense, but I think objectively it probably is. So I think it's totally fair.
well, believe me, as somebody with 3 kids now, I do think of myself as older and older. But just thinking about, I don't know, kind of how you say that it's not like you're the man or whatever, but you do have a certain voice in the community that I think can speak volumes on certain issues. So I think that was more the direction I was angling with that.
Yeah, it might be immodest to say so, but I think it would also be out of touch to be like, no, we're just guys. Like realistically, yeah, we do have some influence and some reach, and so I would rather recognize that and try and do something good with it than pretend like no, 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 we're just guys making a podcast, which we are, but also, yeah, we have a little bit of reach.
Yeah, and I don't mean to draw too much attention to that. Like, as it's kind of a tension point of you want to just be yourself in a genuine space, and also recognize that people listen, and I think that's
Yeah,
an exciting thing.
and we're lucky they do.
Going back to vision briefly, do you have a vision in mind, or do you have a sense of what you would like the capital C's cube community to look like going forward in the future?
I really think that these small scale cube events are just the greatest. I mean, I'm sure you've heard me talk about them. I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard me talk about them, but KubeCon was fantastic. I mean, is still fantastic. But the first KubeCon is what I mean, like as sort of the first event of its sort of ilk. And there were organized cube events before, but they were run differently, right? This was the first one that was kind of run in a like we're gonna get a lot of cubes in the same room, and people are gonna be able to like choose which ones they want to play, and we're gonna try and put people in pods based on what they want to play most, and we're just gonna play cube all weekend, right?
Yeah, and we're still learning things from that event of like, oh, these are just conventions that we picked up from this that still haven't been challenged yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually really interesting. Like, I remember the first event. People may not remember or may not know if you weren't there. People were fully checking in full pools. Like, you had to like check off your pool the same way you'd have to like check it off if you were like opening a sealed pool in like a
Yeah.
at the pro tour. So you had to like indicate your entire pool on a piece of paper, and then Bones was saying in the Discord the other week that I have no memory of this. Apparently, the plan was to run the entire KubeCon as a like called draft across all
Yes,
of the pods.
I believe that's true. Every draft like simultaneously happening across all events,
Crazy that anybody ever thought that would ever work, but
but
yeah,
it had never been done, right? Like,
of course, it's so easy to take for granted, like the things now that just seem like, well, yeah, obviously that's how you do this. That had to be conceived of and tested and like proven by a bunch of people running events like this. But now we have that, right? And that's actually maybe one of the better ways to like define what the cube community is. Like that abstract knowledge that exists that you can access through any one of dozens of people that have run one of these events that are accessible through various online avenues and channels. Like that knowledge of how to run one of these cube events is like it's like folk knowledge now almost, right? Like it's going to be passed down through the generations, I feel like, in a way that really is a core value of the community. Is the thing this is the thing we know how to do collectively that maybe individually none of us could have done without that collective effort.
so do you see that as kind of an increase of these small local cube events, like just seeing more of those in different regions?
Yeah, I think we are going to see more of those, generally speaking, and that's what I want to see. I hope we continue to see people that are just running for their own little region, their own little cube event. And for people listening, I have not been to one of these, and I still have to imagine that the majority of people listening probably have not been to one because they're not
Right.
that popular yet. Still,
And not everybody lives in a large metro area where they've
right?
been
Certainly,
hosted.
some people have to travel a long way, right? So the ones that I've been to, KubeCon maybe being the exception, but pound for pound, it's like you go to a Boston Cube Party and you're dealing with, I don't know, 75 to 85% Boston or Boston metro area residents, basically, which I only know from like talking to every single person I sit across from to play. Like, oh, are you local? And everyone's like, yes, everyone's local. Or they're like, oh, I'm from a town 30 minutes away, right? So most of these events are not like breaking containment. They're not like, people are coming to them from all over the world. It's like weird sickos like me and like, you or Bones or whoever that are like willing to travel to make this stuff happen. And for that reason, I just want more of these small events in more places so that this community is more accessible to people that are not willing to travel because they're not sick freaks.
Well, yeah, and I know you've devoted several episodes and a lot of good resources to trying to encourage people to pursue that sort of thing, like showing how that's possible. Do you think there are practical steps that, like on the ground level, individuals can take to help encourage those sorts of events?
I mean, short of running one yourself, which is, people asked us after the first KubeCon, like, "Are you going to run a Cube event in Baltimore?" And I was like, "No, I'm never running an event. I'm not doing it. You can't make me. I will never do it." And I'm still holding strong 3 or 4 years later. I'm not running a Cube event. Luckily, a member of our local play group stepped up, Max, and ran a Cube event in Baltimore, which I was very grateful for, so I could attend it and like design a pin for it. I'm very happy to design a pin, but I'm not interested in running an event, so I can totally sympathize with, I'm sure, the vast majority of people listening that are like, "That sounds like hell to me," because event management is and organization is really, really difficult. So, I mean, short of doing that, the other thing we're always sort of trying to make more accessible or like encourage people to try and do is really build up their local cube scene. We've heard from tons of people that through listening to our show and like listening to us talk about the virtues of like, hey, just show up somewhere every week, find a good venue. That's like the hardest part. But once you get a good venue, like show up every week and be consistent and make sure that no matter how many people show up, you draft, right? Like
Yeah,
that's like those
yeah.
are the rules. That's like the baseline rules. And there's other stuff you can try and do, but like really just show up and draft. Everybody gets to draft. And the number of people we've heard from that have been able to like, they say like, I thought it was impossible to make a cube community in so and so, but I did these steps, and actually, it turns out 2 months later, we did have a full 8 almost every week, right? Or we had a 10, 1 week or whatever. And so I do also really love empowering people, maybe, or just demystifying the sort of process of building community in that sense. And it's actually kind of like it's so easy to make a Discord community, right? Like I think
Mm,
nobody balks at that. Everyone's like, well, of course, I'll make a server and I'll make rules and I'll like make a cool icon and a fun name for it and like some emotes, right? Like all that stuff. I think people are quick to jump to that if they sort of see an opportunity to sort of do community building in that way. And I think for so many people, building a community in their like physical space, their actual place they live, feels so much scarier or harder or
yeah.
less accessible, and that bums me out. And so I guess part of what we try to do is demystify that. And I think a sufficiently active cube play group will eventually run a cube event. It's like is my like thesis I put forward, right? Like if your play group is big enough and you run for long enough, eventually you'll have a little event, whether it's just 32 people or whatever. That still counts. And these kinds of events are just like, it reminds me like why I love this game. And forgive me, I'm self conscious that I'm sure a lot of your listeners, or some percentage of them, have heard me talk on other podcasts before, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I got into Magic and like actively chose it as a hobby because I'm on computer all day for a job. I have to
Yeah.
be on computer and sitting in front of a screen all day, and I don't want to go on the computer for my hobby. And so even though I think video games are like maybe the highest art right now that are like accessible to humans. Like I think video games are at this incredible apex of creativity and beauty and like artsmanship, artworthiness. I can't play video games because I don't want to sit in front of a screen all day. So I got into Magic so I could specifically play a game with other human beings. And that sort of same reason that like gets me out of my house every Tuesday to go down to Cube Night, that same necessity of like human connection is why I think these cube events are so valuable. And everyone I go to, every single one, I've been to probably I don't know, a dozen now, 10, something like that. Every time I go to one, I end up meeting at least one, usually more people that are like, oh, you are awesome. And I want you to be a person in my life, in my orbit, in some capacity. And those little connections are just so valuable.
Yeah, and I don't know that it can be overstated that while it is possible that there is a measure of work that goes into that, right? Almost every story
So
you
much
hear
work.
about,
Yeah.
every story you hear about these communities getting built from the ground up involves elbow grease. It involves people driving to pick people up. It involves food. It involves, maybe many weeks of just two people at the game store, or
Yeah.
these sorts of things that may be discouraging at first, but to hear that it may take weeks, months, years before you see outcomes. But if it's something that's worthwhile, keep doing it.
We're getting maybe a little surprisingly deep, but I actually think that like this reminds me a little bit of the way I've seen some of my friends engage with romantic relationships, where
Hmm.
they feel like it only counts and it's only real if it is like effortless. And it's like, oh, it has to be like this like perfect effortless love that just works. And if there's any work you put into it, then you're not compatible. It's like it doesn't work anymore. And you're a married man, I'm a married man, and I feel like anybody who's been in a sufficiently long relationship will tell you like that no, that's not a thing. Sorry, that's not how this goes. Like you do have to like put in work, and putting that work in does not devalue the thing. It's not evidence that this relationship or this community you're putting work into isn't really real or like doesn't actually matter or count. It's actually quite the opposite.
Yeah.
The community is the work you put into it. Like you showing up every week, like that is the community. That is what it is. And I think some people do have this idea that like, oh, there's not a Magic community here because it just didn't happen. It didn't like spontaneously magic itself into existence. And that's the sort of mentality that I would love to have some small part in ridding people of, because the best things in life they're always work.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're worth that work. And
Absolutely.
full disclosure, my wife happens to be nearby. She's in a nearby room, so I'm not just saying this for
Cade,
her benefit. I
Cade,
know, I
blink
know.
twice
I
if your
know.
marriage is actually a trap.
No. But just saying, like, you think about even the common vows of many marriage ceremonies, right? That in sickness and in health, for richer, for poorer, for better, for worse, right? These ideas that it's not always smooth sailing, it's not always easy, but it's worth the effort, and it is effort.
I certainly feel that way about romantic relationships and also about the cube community. Maybe
Yeah.
two things I shouldn't conflate. Maybe I shouldn't be feeling
Yeah.
similar ways about them. I don't know, but yeah, that sort of mentality I see in people of like feeling like if they have to work for it, that like it's not real. Like this isn't really a community. I just like trick these people into come out and play cube with me, right? Or like they're only here because I bought pizza. It's like that's true for a little while, but then eventually that's not true anymore, right? Like
It's
that's
true.
like saying someone only likes you because you like are making an effort to like go through overtures and like sweep them off their feet in the early days of a romance. Like yeah, that's part of it, but like that's how you get to the place where you have like a deep, meaningful connection.
Well, and sometimes you do those little icebreaker things. I mean, thinking in the cube sense, sometimes you do bring food, hoping that it will bring people to the event. And then every now and again, your friends and your new friends there will get hooked to the experience that they have there that's not necessarily related to the pizza or whatever. And
Right.
then
Yeah.
even if that's the part of the reason they came initially, it doesn't have to be the reason they come back.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So you've extolled the virtues of these in-person events and participating in events like this. I think just maybe one quick question to that end. What do you think that experience should look like? Like, what would you hope people would experience at an event like that?
This is purely my, like, taste, I should say, up front. Like, I don't want anybody
Of
listening
course.
that's running their own cube event to be like, "Oh, Andy says I'm doing it wrong." I think they're all beautiful, and I love them all, and they're all a little different, right? And I think the differences are actually kind of interesting and cool and telling. I love that they all take place in different venues by necessity, right? But those venues kind of, like, tell you a little something about the place that is kind of interesting and cool. You know, the one in Boston is held in, like, the Cambridge Community Center, which is, like, a community space, in the same
Yeah.
way that all other community spaces are like, maybe they don't have the most resources or money going into things, right? Like everything's a little bit delightfully used and worn. But I truly find it way more charming than, a hotel conference room or whatever. And in Baltimore, Max had the Salt Box in the secondary extra chapel of the church that his mother is one of the preachers at, because he like had a connection, and the church was like, the church rents space. Nobody thinks to rent a church when they are like organizing a cube event, but Max knew because Max is like part of his community. And so like people came to Baltimore, and we played like under stained glass in like a big vaulted ceiling room. And I think the sort of place is very interesting. And my particular favorite kind of cube event that I've been to is, I kind of like them a little smaller. I like a size where you are very likely to run into a person multiple times over the course of the weekend, right? KubeCon is great. The last KubeCon I was at was almost 600 people, I think 575 people. And that's just a size that, like, you could play Magic all weekend and only ever interact with new people the entire time, right? For me, I love like the 64-person event where I am going to be in the same pod as 8 different people twice over the course of the weekend, right? And
Mm.
so like I get to see them a couple times and maybe start to build a little bit of a rapport. I feel like the like little kind of play groups or like social cliques that end up attending these events are like more visible in that small scale, and there's more sort of ability for them to like intermingle, right? KubeCon, some people are there individually, some people are there with one friend, some people are there like our play group or the Madison play group with like 20 people, right? And they're all wearing matching shirts or whatever. And I think when there's like that many people in a room, there's like all these different kind of cliques, it's kind of hard to like move around. But those sort of walls seem way more accessible when it's sort of a smaller group, and you just end up sitting next to somebody at lunch that you happen to have played yesterday in a pod, right? And you can like strike up a conversation. So I like the small scale events. I really like that they are easier to run, and I want to like validate anybody that is considering running a small cube event that thinks, oh, is it not cool enough because I can only run 48 people or 64 people? And like, no, they're awesome. They're really cool, and that means it can also happen in places where there's like, less people, just smaller population centers. I also love when the events are casual. That's maybe the thing that I like, just personally bristle against the most out of the sort of like founding principles of KubeCon. KubeCon was founded to be like a competitive event. That was like in its DNA from the very beginning, and sort of dictated how Hedron Network was built to like have a rankings page and everything always break into a top 8 and a top 64. And then you like, draft and there's always a winner. And it's completely natural, I think, for any Magic event to inherit that from Constructed, right? Like every other Magic event in history was about playing a bunch of Magic and crowning a winner. And so,
Yeah, it's all about who wins, right?
right. And so it makes sense that that would be like the core assumption you would start with. But I was most recently at Inland Northwest Cube Fest, where, to my knowledge, Jane was the first person I've heard of running an event like this that did not cut to a top 8, did not have a draft at the end of the weekend that was like determining a winner, took the standings page down on, Hedron Network. I think just asked Gwen to like hide it so that no one could ever see it. And honestly, like, I didn't feel anybody like less invested because of this. Like, it still felt like people really wanted to win. I think people really want the pins, right? The pins are like for trophying a draft is like nothing you could ever do for like the winner of the entire event could ever be as meaningful as like a pin is going to be to almost everybody walking in that door.
Yeah, everybody has more of a Raven brain than they care to admit on those.
Absolutely, for sure. So like people still wanted to win. It was like, it wasn't like the whole event had devolved into like, a game of Calvin ball, but there was also just like that much less pressure, right? Like I watched a bunch of people just be like, yeah, we're going to draw, but I'm almost certain you're going to win this game in the long run. So I'll concede to you, right? Instead of just saying, yeah, give me the draw so that I have like, another point, whatever, 5% in the sort of rankings. So like, I think these events are best when they're casual, and the sort of perfect vibe for me is like everyone wants to win because they want a pin, right? And everyone agrees that a pin is worth nothing but, emotional value. There is no financial value. There's no like even like social credit. It's just like this is the thing that you can be proud of and that means something to you because it's a sign of your sort of weekend. Yeah, so I like them casual. I like them small, and I think they're best when they also highlight some aspect of the region that they're in.
I was thinking about that as you're describing it. One of the very recent episodes of Lucky Paper Radio, you were talking to DSB about Stone Soup Draft. He was very quick to point out that, like, hey, this is still young, this is still evolving. And I think in a similar spirit, maybe because it's just such a larger scale to think of hosting events versus particular formats, but like it still feels like cube events and like grassroots cube events are still pretty young, right?
Oh, for sure.
CubeCon 1 was only 4 years ago now at time of recording.
The first KubeCon was in 2022, so they've been 22, 23, 24, and 25. So it'll be the fourth one this year. You're right. Yeah, yeah.
To that end, though, just noting that if that is one of the ones that really kicked things off, to think that we really don't have all that much experience yet. Like we're still feeling out so much of what these things could look like.
Yeah, and like truly the amount of like explosive the explosive growth in the grassroots cube event space, demands attention. I'm looking at our events page right now, and there was in 2022 three cube events, but a lot of these cube events from the earlier years are this particular group in Europe, Germany specifically, that does these kind of like small scale 24-person events. So like, not to say that doesn't count, it definitely counts,
Right, right,
but
right.
that is only catering to a very small potential audience of people. So we went from like CubeCon in 2022, CubeCon, and then Joe running California Cube Champs, because Joe is like,
It's truly amazing. Yeah.
this is a great example of like how Joe and I are such different people. I love Joe. We are so different in so many ways, and one of the ways we're different is that even when we had like a like reasonably successful podcast underneath of us, and like I've been living in this city for 17, 18 years, and I'm like I have connections to people that like own event space that I could potentially talk to. Like it's feasible for me to run an event here, but I was like I'm never doing that. And Joe meanwhile was like I don't have a space, I don't have anything, but I'm running an event, right? And like the community needs people like that. Like they need people like Joe who's just like I'm going to do it and see what happens, because Joe doing that then gives that much more information and knowledge to people that are coming after Joe. So yeah, CubeCon 2 and Joe in 2023. I think there were then 17 events in 2024, and now it's 2025, and we already, I think, have over 30 events on the calendar, and I expect more to pop up before the end of the year. So it's really blown up in a big way, but it is very young, like you said.
Well, this feels in a way like an inside scoop or breaking news to me in a way, but we share kind of an allergy to monetization, I think, of different projects, but it's really exciting that folks have latched on to the opportunity to support Lucky Paper through the Patreon. Not just for the show, but for some of the additional endeavors that you're looking toward. One of those you mentioned, you called the Cube Fellowship, and I'm really excited to hear a little bit about that program.
I just gotta say, I feel like this is a masterclass in how to actually make a good podcast, because I feel like you have been just subtly setting the table with all of your questions to kind of, this is really the confluence of everything we've just been talking about, right? Like, yes, I feel like we have some kind of responsibility as a like central figure in the community to like try and do something valuable with whatever little influence we have. Yes, I think these small cube events are the best thing going for the format and the absolute best way to codify and make real otherwise online perhaps tenuous connections to people. And yeah, I'm allergic to monetizing things. It grosses me out. It really grosses me out. And I also don't want to have to like report other income on my taxes. That's complicated. I don't want to have to do that.
Right.
So yeah, something I said when we launched the Patreon just now, like I think it was literally like a month ago. It was the beginning of July, so like 5-6 weeks ago, we launched the Patreon at time of recording, and I truly didn't know what to expect. I mean, I guess I had a range I expected. I was like, we'll probably make somewhere between like I don't know, $300 and 1,000. That was kind of like what I was imagining. And one of the things I was concerned about is like, what if we make more money? What are we going to do with it? I don't want to have to like. It's genuinely a responsibility that I feel like was the thing that would stress me out. And one of the reasons we eventually did come around to starting the Patreon was because of this idea to give some of that money back if we have extra cash for whatever reason, to basically feed it into the parts of the community that we believe the most in, which are these small cube events. And we could give money to people to like run small cube events, but I think the easiest way to do that honestly is just to find people that want to attend these events and give them money to do so, which means that money is essentially, mostly making its way down to the people running those cube events. I mean, maybe some of it's paying for travel costs or other things or whatever, childcare. But if we can help people attend an event and buy a ticket to one of these events and fill up those seats and actually get those draft pods full, that's something that I think, are in a position to actually do, right? I know there are people that are fans of the show that they work in tech. They've got some extra cash. Maybe they don't have, a bunch of expenses or kids or whatever, no dependents. And they're willing to invest money in the format and the community they really love. And I notice people listening to the show that just don't have that, right? They're working in a service industry or recently unemployed or whatever, that just like don't have access to those resources. And basically, like, from each according to their capacity and to each according to their need, right? Like, if people have extra money and they want to support the community, great. And maybe those people would not ever meet the people that would love to be a member of this community, would love to participate in these events, but otherwise wouldn't be able to make that happen, or it's too much of a sort of stress to make that happen. And so if we can just be a connective tissue to like help bring those people together, then that's, I think, a great thing for us to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really exciting outlet, when you have extra income. And first, what a good problem to have, quote unquote. But to say we want to help the community, we want to encourage the community to participate more in the craft. I think that's a great outlet.
I think these events are the best, and I want more of them. I want them more places, and I want more people to be able to experience what it's like to go to one. And maybe for the first time, if you're not even active in online spaces, like, talk to other people that are really invested in cube design and like are going to have interesting questions for you, or interesting feedback on your cube. Or if you are in these online spaces, to, for the first time, put a face to a name or username
Yeah.
or a handle. I think it's just so valuable. And honestly, like, I will say, like, I'm very proud so far. I mean, this is still early days, but like, I am very proud to have stuck by our like stated values. And we started actually giving money out before we even got any money from Patreon. We knew it was coming, so it was basically, coming. But like, I turned around and just started giving the money out immediately, because I'm like, yeah, this is much better spent elsewhere than doing whatever I would do with it. And I'm just so grateful to be able to be in a position to do that.
Yeah, I think in that spirit, talking about wanting to immediately turn things back around, you've been a pretty outspoken advocate of transparency in other cube related pursuits and programs. Like, did that impact a desire to do something like this as well?
Well, yeah, I think it's maybe the other way around. It's like, if we were going to ask people for money in any way, I wanted them to know what it was going to be spent on. If people are listening to this and you're like a creator or whatever, and you have a Patreon and you don't do this, I'm not saying this is like a moral obligation. I'm saying this is a thing for me that like makes me feel a lot better about doing it. And so, yeah, we put a little page on our website with all of our operating costs and income over the entire life of every aspect of this project, which I think I first registered this domain name in 2018. So it's been quite some time.
Wow. Yeah.
And yeah, this is going to be updated, every month, or, every couple weeks, as more costs and income come in, which I hope will serve as some evidence to people that like we're not just like saying we're doing this and then not doing it. Like, we're kind of showing our work in terms of where these funds are actually going. And also, I think maybe be instructive to people who maybe also want to start their own content thing, or they're interested in like running a podcast or a YouTube channel or something, where they want to know what amount of money they can make off of merch, maybe, or like what the costs are going to look like. Just, I think the transparency is like such a helpful thing to anybody else that might want to do something similar.
What does the Cube Fellowship look like practically? How would this play out for someone who you would want to help support?
Yeah, there is an application, which at the time we're recording is not yet on the website. It's just a Google form, but it'll be on the website. By the time this episode comes out, there will be a page at luckypaper.co/cube fellowship that will have a link to the application if you want to apply for, some money to go to an event. And on that page will also be an opportunity to, I did make pins. I decided to, get in on the pin game. Everyone's all about pins. And I really wanted a way for people that either don't want to do like a subscription thing, which we heard from a couple people when we started the Patreon, and I can sympathize with this so much. They're like, please just make some merch or something so I can give you like some money once, because I want to support the show, but I do not want another subscription. And like,
Yeah.
I hear you. I hate subscriptions. I am subscribed to a number of Patreons because that's the only way to support a lot of people that I really like, but I hate them for the same reason. So I hear that. So this is an opportunity for people that don't want to get in on the sort of subscription racket, and just want to sort of make a one-time contribution. We're basically selling pins for a steep profit. They're like, expensive for pins, but it's basically a donation to this Cube Fellowship Fund, and you get a pin to sort of show for it. And my like ultimate dream is that at the big Cube event like CubeCon next year, or Shoebox maybe, there's a whole gaggle of people that are there that are like essentially the Lucky Paper team. They're like representing what we think are like the best and brightest in the Cube community, the people that like are the reason these events are great, and we're sending the best people we can possibly find. And those people then can see everybody that has a little pin on their backpack that like matches, and be like, oh, that's somebody that believes in this community that like helped me be here, right? That's kind of the like vision that I have. So yeah, those are the two ways you can engage for it. If you want to apply for a fellowship to attend an event, you can do it on that page. Or if you would like to just buy a pin to support the endeavor, you can do that. And all of the proceeds from the pin sales, after the costs of production and shipping, are going directly to the Cube Fellowship Fund.
Well, that's really exciting. I imagine that this is a program that you would expect to grow and develop over time.
I have no idea. I hope so. But we're recording this a few weeks before this will be like all public, and I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Just like I didn't know how many people were going to support the Patreon, I'm not sure how many people are willing to buy like an expensive pin, or willing to donate to this essentially to get a pin in exchange. I have no idea how many people are willing to, are interested enough in this event to like fill out a kind of long application and like tell us about their relationship to this format and the sort of value they bring to the community. So I don't know, but yes, I would love for there to be some future where this grows and is a way that we can help a lot of people enjoy the best part of the best game.
Well, we have definitely seen people fight for pins in the past, so here's hoping that that is at
Yeah.
least part of the incentive.
But part of what was important about those is you couldn't buy them,
That's
If
right.
you can just buy them, then I think that no one cares about winning them anymore either. Like it's something really important about the fact that you have to get
That's
them through a
true.
specific means. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I truly have no expectations. I'm just gonna put it out there and see what happens.
Well, Andy, I usually ask here as we kind of wrap up a conversation about advice for designers. But as we've kind of been thinking more broadly about participating in the cube space, I want to ask instead, what advice would you want to share with folks as they seek to welcome others in whatever cube space they're part of?
It's funny because I think the best advice is, well, I think the most important thing is really hard to give advice for, right? The most important thing is like just don't be weird. And it's hard because the people that need to hear that won't know what it means to not be weird, right?
Yeah.
But I think ultimately, like Magic, especially sort of the more enfranchised and invested forms of Magic, like Cube, appeals to certain types of people. And I think sometimes, the sort of high level social skills maybe are not the things that people have the most of, and I think that's a reason why people maybe are worried about starting their own cube night, because they're like, well, no one likes me, or like I don't have enough friends, or I'll be awkward and weird. And I guess it would just come down to like empathy is like the most important thing, right? And I think people should always be striving to try and put themselves in the shoes of other people that are in their community, right? Like try and imagine what you would feel like if you came out to your first cube night and this is what you happened upon, right? You happened upon, a clique of people that all knew each other really well and like all do each other's names and inside jokes, and you were on the outside of them and nobody really introduced themselves and they just kind of carried on and expected you to kind of blend in. How would you feel if you showed up to a cube night and everybody's playing a cube that is like really complicated and has all these weird interactions and you've never seen it before, read the list, and so you're at like a huge disadvantage, right? Like just try and put yourself in the shoes of the people that you are hoping to welcome into your community, and don't be afraid to do the work, right? It's not fake if you have to like consciously work to be more welcoming or more friendly. It's not fake if you like go out of your way to like buy a drink for the person that showed up for the first time, right? That's something I did for a while in our play group. Is like if someone was there for the first time and I played them in a match, after the match I would buy them a drink.
I love that. That's great.
It was a simple thing, right? And for me, it like reinforced so many things. One thing I wanted to reinforce is like, hey, we try and spend money at the bar while we're here because this is our local game store and they don't charge us for this. So like, this is a thing that we value. And also it was like just welcoming somebody. It's like such a simple little thing, right? And I feel like some people will be like, well, that would just feel so fake, and like just doing that for a stranger, it feels like I'm just trying to like butter them up or whatever. And it's like, no, it's just a nice thing to do. You can just do nice things for people, and it's not actually that weird. So don't be afraid to do that work on yourself or in your community to like be more actively welcoming. It still counts. It counts actually more than the stuff that happens without effort.
I was chatting with a friend recently about writing music and writing songs, and particularly talking about the difficulty of writing lyrics that don't sound hokey. And there's something to be said for sincerity, right? If you genuinely mean something, regardless of how corny it is, it can carry. And I think that works here too. It may read silly on paper, but like actually making the effort to, to buy somebody a drink, to make sure that they have a seat at the table, that actually does work.
You know, I already mentioned that I was very involved in a Dave Matthews Band forum when I was in high school. Maybe that got cut out, and now people don't know what I'm referencing, and maybe that's even better. I've been playing guitar for a long time, and I aspired for many years. The kind of guitar I wanted to play was like acoustic singer-songwriter stuff. I wanted to be able to like
Yep.
sit down, play and sing a song at the same time, and I am not a good vocalist, Cade. I am quite poor at it.
I don't know. Your intros in
Well,
recent weeks have suggested otherwise.
so here's what I want to say is like the thing about singing that no one ever taught me that I eventually figured out myself is that like you have to like full send it in a way that like you feel silly doing it.
Yeah.
And that's your only chance of it actually like sounding okay. You
Yeah.
can't like half send it. It doesn't work. You have to like do a thing that feels fundamentally in your bones embarrassing and cringe and wrong, and then it might actually work. And maybe there's a lesson there about like building a community that like it might feel weird and wrong to you to be like going out of your way to like shake someone's hand and be like, "Hi, I'm Andy. What's your name? Welcome to Cube Night." That might feel like it's fundamentally uncool and you like want your cube night to be cool or whatever, but that's actually how you do it. That is the work. That's how it's done. Like you have to just commit to the bit. And I don't know, I feel like by committing to the bit, I'm able to make intros that are like where the vocals are acceptable. That most people wouldn't clock them as awful, at least as like laughably awful, which is all I need to do for the purposes of my intros. They don't have to be great. But I was so much worse for so long because I was so self-conscious about it. And then it's like,
Yeah.
you just got to do it. You just got to send.
That's the advice. That's the takeaway is just send it.
Yeah.
Full send. Well, Andy, I would be remiss to not ask you perhaps my favorite question here as we're wrapping up, which is if you could have any card printed as a promo, what card would you pick and who would you have do the illustration?
Oh, I'm like so many of your past guests. I too have thought so much about this, and I only regret that I feel like I will, as soon as I hang up, like in a couple days, be like, no, I should have picked that instead. So I considered using my sort of vote here on miscalculation just to get us a copy of miscalculation that doesn't say interrupt on the type line, because
That's
I think
amazing.
I think it's unhinged that like this beautiful, elegant, perfect quench variant with a like evergreen adjacent mechanic, like cycling is not evergreen, but it's deciduous, it comes back all the time, has never gotten a reprint. It's wild to me. But that's not where my passion lies. My passion lies in landscapes, architecture, in lands. So if I may give maybe a little bit of an ambitious answer here, I would love to have a full cycle of fetch lands. I'm a huge fetch land stan. I think they are fabulous. Yes, shuffling is annoying, but everything else about those fetch lands I think does so much to a drafted environment. And the landscape artist that I would most want to do a cycle of fetch lands is Wayne Thiebaud, who is maybe most known, I think, for his like kind of pop arty paintings of desserts. So if you like Google his name, you might see like, some ice cream parfaits or whatever in like Technicolor. But he does these beautiful landscapes. The most visceral ones for me are all inspired by the sort of steep hills of San Francisco. But his sort of sense of color and the way he renders the sort of landscapes in this like geometrical, but not unnecessarily graphic designery way. The sensibility for composition feels designery, but his mark making is very painterly in a way that is a really rare combination. I think it's rare to get somebody that values those two things. And there's like a number of his landscapes and like cityscapes that are just among my favorite paintings of all time of any kind. And there's a couple of them in there. So yeah, I'm going Wayne Thiebaud on a cycle of fetch lands. And if that's cheating, I guess I'll have him do a prismatic vista.
No, no, no. I figure the rules are there to be broken anyway, in that there are not really any rules. But this is remarkable. I'm not as familiar with his work, or I wasn't before. Yeah, as you noted, really geometric in these really striking ways. And his color palette is like, I don't know, almost, is it fair to say like almost Seussical? Like
It
it's like
is.
really bright pastels, but they come together in a way that captures more of a realism than I would expect.
Yeah, it's a really rich, bright palette, but his use of color is very accurate, right? Like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I've taken some painting classes and like, you know, learned how to like render a shadow and render atmospheric perspective. And like he's following all those rules, but doing it in this very stylistic way that it's just the kind of art that like I feel like I will never be able to make and therefore have the most respect and admiration for. And just some of the most beautiful paintings. I'm just obsessed with them.
Yeah, and truly, as you noted, gorgeous desserts that he that he has painted.
Those I actually don't care about at all. I have those mean nothing to me. I could not care less. But the landscapes, they get me every time.
Amazing. Well, Andy, this has been a treasure. I'm so glad that you took the time to be here and to share your passion for the Cube community and the Cube Fellowship as an opportunity up and coming. I think that's really exciting for many, many folks. So thank you for taking the time.
Kate, I am so grateful for you and the role you play in this community, and for you kind of like maybe taking a little risk on talking to me not about a cube, because you know we like texted a little bit or like Discord message a little bit, you know, back when we started the show, and you were like, if you ever want to come on, like let me know. And I was like, yeah, but like everyone hears me talk about cube all the time. Like what is there to like, I don't know. I wanted something unique for this conversation that was not just a thing we would also maybe talk about on Lucky Paper Radio. And this sort of like specific perspective for me, not like the show or me and Anthony, but just for me on like what this community means, I think is yeah, I was really grateful to get to talk about it with you.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Well, and I'm not techie enough to talk about Smash Bros, but some other time maybe.
Well, tech is when you hit a stage or the wall and you gotta hit the shield button at the right moment, and that's how you tech. You don't have knockback. Your knockback is stopped then, and you can act more quickly.
I got to play Smash Brothers with a group of youth students at a local church once, and I remember they all told me, "You play like a melee player," and I was like, "I don't know what that means,"
That's
but
incredible. How old were they?
they were well, they were in youth, so like high schoolers in the mid 20 teens.
That's incredible because that game came out before they were all born, and
That's
yet
probably correct.
no, it truly, and yet its legacy has like carried on, right? Like that has got to be one of the most like long-lived video games of all time is Super Smash Bros. Melee, and the fact that kids knew enough about it to know that you like stylistically, like your technique was reminiscent of a Melee player is shocking and beautiful
Every community's got its layers, doesn't it?
for sure.
Well, Andy, if folks want to hear you talk more about Cube or about community or about anything else or any of the projects you're working on, where should we point them?
Everything is at luckypaper.co. We put it all in one place for your convenience.
Perfect. Well, as I noted, it's a joy to spend the time. I'm really so grateful to you. Thank you for all you've done to encourage me and so many others in the Cube space. And I'm looking forward to more chances to connect here in the future.
Thank you, Cade.